I'm Teresa Tomeo, and I am an author, a speaker, a revert to the faith, and I also own my own communications company, Teresa Tomeo Communications, and I address media issues that matter. That's my tagline for my company, and I am all about media awareness and activism and helping people learn more about their Catholic faith. Extreme Makeover to me is a female version of my first book, Noise, How Our Media-Saturated Culture Dominates Lives and Dismantles Families. So when I was researching that book, I was amazed to find out how much of the research on media influence on families and just overall media influence issues and studies and the different facts that are out there about the media. It was interesting to me that so much of it, so much of the research and so much of the influence was actually targeting women, whether it was sexual promiscuity, whether it was the marketing of birth control and abortion, whether it was pornography, the sexual objectification. All of these issues were coming up over and over and over again. Body image, another big issue. In almost every area of media influence, you could see how the women were being directly targeted. So I wanted to put all of this together in a book about women, not just for women, but about women. So these big areas, radical feminism, abortion, contraception, body image issues, could be examined and the secular research that's available exposed. I wanted it to be the go-to book for women and culture, and also men and culture, just as Noise is for families and culture. I think it's for anyone, any adult who is concerned about media influence and what's going on in our culture, anyone who's interested in engaging the culture, anyone who's interested in just getting a handle on everything that's out there that's thrown at us 24/7. And I really think it's for people both in the secular arena and also in the Christian arena, both Catholic and Protestant, because what I like to do is to show how God exists everywhere, and everything goes back to the church because of natural law and truth, and it can be exposed in a number of different ways. In my heart, I also want to reach as many women as possible, especially women my age in their 40s and their 50s, who are like me and may be walking wounded. People who may be damaged and not even realize that they know something just isn't quite right in their life. They may still be using contraception and may have had an abortion, or may have been divorced, or have been away from the church, and something is just not right. But the world is telling them that they should be completely happy because they're doing whatever they want and they're living the certain way that the world says is okay. So I want this to reach out to people who have a yearning, may not be sure what's going on inside, but that something is not right. And then I also want to reach the catechized to strengthen them and affirm them and give them as many resources as possible. So it really is for anyone interested in cultural issues, especially how they affect women and families. Absolutely. It was absolutely intentional, because my area of expertise is the media, and we see all these extreme makeover shows, Extreme Makeover Home Edition, and on and on and on. But what about a real extreme makeover? And it is an extreme makeover when you radically come into or go back to the church, in a sense that, and this is my life, living away from God for 17 years, away from Mass, away from the sacraments, and then making this dramatic switch. You have to go through an extreme makeover from the inside out. And so I thought that because of all the quote-unquote media exposure on these different shows that are out there talking about extreme makeovers, that title would be extremely popular, or at least grab someone's attention when they're walking through the bookstore. Well, I know it's already having an impact because I give my testimony on a regular basis at speaking events, and I think it's having an impact because I'm very real. What you see is what you get with me. There's not a phony bone in my body. I couldn't pass it off even if I tried to be someone else. I've been through a lot in my life, and I want people to know that, God loves you right where you're at, but He also loves you too much to leave you there, and that an extreme makeover is not an impossibility, that with God all things are possible, and that if I could go from the very secular lifestyle that I was living and do what I'm doing now and have a total reversion, and now just everything I do is targeted toward the Lord and spreading the Catholic faith and helping people deal with cultural issues out there, then anybody can change. No one is ever too far away from God. As long as you're alive, there's hope, and that's really what I want people to know. Well, Romans 8:28, of course, is all things work together for good for those who love the Lord and are called according to His purpose. And God can definitely make lemonade out of lemons, because He certainly did that in my life. In every area of my life where I made a mistake, and even where some of the areas professionally where I had a lot of success, God is using that. God has used everything that I have done for the greater glory to help someone else, whether it's my marriage issues, whether it's some of the problems I had in the secular media that I came up against with the persecution, whatever it is, God has taken it and has turned it around to use for His glory. All the experience that I have, especially in the secular media, all the gifts that I have of being on the air for 30 years, I'm now using for God. So He's taking all of that, which for a while was very damaging to me in terms of what it did to my psyche, what it did to my spirit. But at the same time, I was honing my skills as a broadcaster. I was learning how to interview, I was learning how to write, I was learning how to research, I was learning how to do radio and television, and I was very successful at it. And now I'm able to host a Catholic show, do television interviews like this one, work for EWTN and Ave Maria Radio, and help bring a professional sound to the Catholic media. So that's one area of Romans 8:28. Another area, as I mentioned, my marriage, in terms of God saving our marriage. My husband and I do a lot of marriage programs for engaged couples, and also give our testimony around the country. We do tours together to Italy to try to promote marriage. And so God is using our problems. The crisis in our life, in our marriage, was actually what brought us both back to the church. And so again, if you, when you're going through a crisis, can reach out and turn everything over to God, He can make lemonade out of lemons. But that's the step that you have to take. You have to go from that point A to point B. And that sometimes that leap is very big, and it also takes time. It's like peeling an onion layer after layer. I talk in the book about a cultural detox that I went through, where I had to peel away everything that I was just so steeped in as a secular journalist. You know, I bought into radical feminism. I was considered myself pro-choice, which is such an oxymoron. I was very much, saw nothing wrong with contraception. I contracepted for years, which added to the problems in our marriage, and I go into that in the book. So it takes time. It's a layering, a pulling back. But I just really feel so strongly that if people just knew really about all these different messages out there, that they would be able to see, maybe connect the dots, and go back to the church and see how what the church gives us makes so much sense. As I said earlier, I think when I was planning the book in my head and praying about this, I did feel a call on my heart, because I do a lot of women's conferences and I do a lot of women's retreats, conduct them myself. So obviously I want to reach a lot of women, but I think it's very important for men to read this book, because I think if men have a better understanding of how women are just tossed aside, tossed aside, yes, but also tossed about back and forth on these waves of just, extremism from one area to another. For example, in one area of our life, we're told that we have to, break through that glass ceiling and make, 6 figures plus, and then we have to be a size 2, and then we also, have to put children aside, but then we should be able to have children if we want them, but then we have to look a certain way, we have to act a certain way. There's all of these different things coming at us all the time, and it's a very, very confusing place to be when you're just out there by your own in secular society as a woman. And it's very confusing for men too, because we're getting all these different messages, and then there's a lot of pent-up anger, frustration, resentment. There's so many women who are post-abortive, who are walking around, as I said earlier, walking wounded, or women who have been contracepted for years and feel like they're being used, but don't even know why they feel this way, don't understand it. So imagine what that is doing to relationships. Imagine the impact that's having on men, plus how men just have been, I think, really pushed aside. The father figure, the important role of the husband in the household and marriage, how it's been so demeaned and also tossed aside. So I really hope men read this, because I think it'll give them some clarity on maybe some of the issues that they've been having in their own life and maybe their own relationships. So I really think men could greatly benefit from the book. Absolutely. As a matter of fact, I didn't want to leave people with just a sense of, oh my gosh, it's so bad, I want to stay in bed and pull the covers over my head, or run around like Chicken Little and say the sky is falling. What I wanted people to know is that as long as you are breathing, as long as you are alive, there is always hope, and it's never too late to reach out to Christ. And I see positive change, and so I wrote a chapter in the book, toward the end of the book, called Hope Springs Eternal, to give people a good idea of some of the really great stuff that's going on in Catholic evangelization, with the Holy Father and the amazing catechesis he's doing, but also how people out there in the secular world are starting, some of them are starting to wake up and realize, you know what? Maybe the church has something. And maybe it's not even a recognition of religion, so to speak, or the organized church, but it's a recognition of the natural law. Something is not right. And people are having a real issue with what's going on with marriage, what's going on with relationships, and especially what's going on with their children. Even if they're not a practicing Catholic, even if they call themselves an agnostic or an atheist, I find that I can take this message of media awareness and activism to so many different arenas because it affects everybody. Nobody is immune to this unless you're, sequestered 24/7. So I just really think that an extreme makeover is possible. I see it happening. It happened in my own life. And of course, that's how it has to happen, one person at a time. But there's so much good that's going on, as well as all the bad stuff out there. There's a lot of good. And oftentimes we get bogged down in the negative. So I wanted to give people some positive examples of just how there can be an extreme makeover and things aren't all that bad. I have a chapter in there where I call your extreme makeover beauty plan, and it's beauty from the inside out, but also beauty on the outside as well, where I talk about the fact that it's okay to look nice, to dress nicely, to take care of ourselves, to wear makeup, to get our nails done. I certainly do all of those things. I'm a public person and I take pride in the way I look and present myself, but then I also emphasize that it has to start on the inside first. And what do you need to do to start that extreme makeover process? And so I give them a step-by-step spiritual makeover beauty plan with tips, for example, of you have to start with when you're putting your makeup on, you have to start with your foundation. And so what's your foundation? Your foundation is the faith, your foundation is scripture, and all these other things that we have in the Catholic Church. And then I have them look at some of the external things that may be affecting their beauty, such as media influence, different relationships, acceptance of secular messages, turning away from church teaching, and how that has to change. So it's a step-by-step spiritual beauty plan. I say it's like a walk through a spiritual spa, and you'll come out being spanky clean on the inside and out. Well, there's a lot of information in the book, and I'm trained as an investigative reporter and a journalist, and so I'm all about statistics and backing up what I say, attribution. That's the way I was trained, even though unfortunately it's not done all that much more in the secular media. It's all more about agenda, which I also talk about in the book. Oh shoot, what was the question? I lost my train of thought. I'm talking so fast.
No problem.
Oh, the questions, reflection questions. Okay, we'll start it from the top. I'm giving people an awful lot of information, and I don't want them to be on information overload. What I want them to do after reading each chapter is to stop, think and pray about what they just read, because there's some alarming statistics in there, but then look at the questions at the end of the chapter and reflect and make some notes and just go through your own process of your own cultural detox and use those questions as a guide. And also in some cases it might be a good guide for a personal examination of conscience before going into confession. So that's what the questions are about, giving you a chance to reflect and to think about what's been presented to you and how you might be affecting yourself by buying into some of these messages that are out there. Well, gosh, there's so much. I think probably for me, the abortion chapter, the abortion distortion, and also the feminine mistake, the chapter on radical feminism, because of the way these things are presented. They're presented as beauty and choice and freedom, and there is so much information, so much research to show just the opposite. And then I think probably what's also very meaningful is the last chapter was Let's Hear It for the Girls. Stories of testimonies and timeless truths of women who either came into the church or reverted to the church as I did. The journeys are amazing, and what's so revealing to me over and over again is how God works so differently but so beautifully and so perfectly in everyone's life. Well, for me, giving my testimony up front is just to lay it on the line. This is where I came from. This is why I know this is true, because I lived it. Okay, I lived the journey of being without God and then coming back to the church. I've done media since I was 14 years old. I've been on the radio since I was 14. It's the only thing I've ever known in terms of a profession. So I know the industry inside and out. So I know what I'm talking about from both the professional experience in the newsrooms and in the media, but I also know that the church is right because of what I lived through. I'm born a cradle Catholic, falling away, not understanding the teachings, and then coming back and studying them. So that's the purpose of my testimony in the front of the book. The purpose of the testimonies at the end is to show different women, some stay-at-home moms, some with very big careers. One is a doctor who came over from atheism, to show, as I said earlier, how God works so personally and so individually and beautifully and perfectly in everyone's lives, and how it's all a different journey, but it's our journey. And it's that journey step by step by step of this beautiful pattern that we really don't see until we come back into the church. I heard someone say, I'm trying to remember which priest or a pastor on television said it, but that our lives are like, we look at our lives and we see the back of, for example, a needlepoint square, which looks very confusing, and the strings and the yarn going everywhere, it looks like a mess. Then you turn it over and there's this beautiful pattern that's been developed, and this beautiful picture that you now have. Well, we are looking at our life from the back. God is looking at it from the front, and He sees the whole picture. And so that's why I close with those testimonies, to see how these pictures were forming, and these beautiful frames were all coming together from very different areas, from all over the world, all walks of life, and that anything is possible with God. No, just that I'm honored to be able to do this book, and I can't believe that God's using me the way He's using me. That's it. Sorry. Ignatius Press has been a huge source of information and education for me in my reversion to the Catholic faith. I've read so many Ignatius books, I've lost count. One of my favorites is Louis de Waal's book about St. Catherine of Siena, Lace Each to Heaven, and there's also Born Fundamentalist, Born Again Catholic. Carl Keating's books on fundamentalism versus Catholicism. Steve Ray's books. Steve Ray's a personal friend of mine, but his books, you know, Crossing the Tiber, are absolutely amazing. And I can look at my own reversion to the faith, and I look in my office where I have all my books that just keep piling up, and 9 out of 10 books are from Ignatius Press. And it's just been so formative for me, and now to be writing for Ignatius Press is just, it's just a dream come true.